There was an envelope sitting on top of my dinner plate. Not beside it. Not under it. On it. Centered. Like someone had measured the placement. My name was typed across the front in a font I knew instantly. The same font my mother-in-law used on every label in her pantry. Sealed shut. Waiting for me like a verdict. I hadn't even taken my coat off yet. 8 people were already seated at that table. Watching me. Waiting to see what I would do. I opened it standing up. Inside was an invoice. Clean, professional, almost beautiful in how official it looked. Rent due. $1,500. Tenant. Me. For an apartment I had bought, with my own money, 5 years before I ever knew this family existed. Somewhere down the table, a bracelet clinked softly against a wine glass. "Well," she said, smiling like she just served dessert. "Are we going to talk about this like adults?" I folded the paper. I slid it into my purse. And I smiled back at her. Because in that exact second, I already knew exactly what I was going to do next. What I did after that dinner ended my marriage. What I found 3 weeks later ended something much bigger than that. Before we go any further, if stories like this one hit you somewhere real, hit subscribe right now. Because what happens in the next 30 minutes is going to stay with you long after the video ends. My name is Naomi. I'm 33 years old. I grew up bouncing between strangers' houses, and I became the kind of woman who reads a balance sheet the way other people read a face, to find out who's lying. This is the story of the night my mother-in-law handed me a bill for my own home, and what I found when I finally decided to look behind her. Let me take you back further than the dinner table. Because you won't understand why I did what I did unless you understand where I came from. I was 7 years old the night my mother died. A highway outside the city, rain coming down sideways, a truck that crossed a line it shouldn't have. One phone call changed the entire shape of my life. My father had never been more than a blank space on a piece of paper. So the state did what the state does. It found me a bed. Then another bed. Then another. 4 homes in 11 years. None of them cruel. Most of them tired, overworked, doing their best with too many kids and not enough bedrooms. I remember a family who moved away when I was 12 and couldn't legally take me across the state line with them. I remember a woman who still sends me a birthday card every single year, even now. But foster care doesn't just take your parents from you. It teaches you a lesson that never quite leaves your bones. Everything can be taken. Your room. Your school. The family photo on someone's refrigerator that gets quietly replaced the year you're not in it anymore. So you learn, very early, to hold on to whatever you can hold on to. You learn to keep one thing, just one, that nobody can vote you out of. The day I turned 18, I walked out with a duffel bag, $1,400 I'd saved from tutoring kids in algebra, and absolutely no illusions that anyone was coming to rescue me. I got a job at a small tax office. I enrolled in community college at night. I rented a room in a house with 3 roommates I barely knew. And the first morning I made coffee in that kitchen. Cheap grounds, a chipped mug, nobody who could move me to a different house by Friday. It felt like the first thing I had ever truly owned in my entire life. I fell in love with numbers the way other people fall in love with music. A column either balances or it doesn't. Nobody can vote on whether you did the work. There's no version of a spreadsheet that decides, halfway through, that it doesn't want you anymore. My first boss, a woman who had built her accounting firm from a single room above a dry cleaner, taught me something I never forgot. Keep your assets separated, sweetheart, she told me once, stirring her coffee like it was nothing at all. The world only takes from the people who leave the door unlocked. I passed my CPA exam on the first try. By 25, after years of overtime and a discipline with money that probably looked obsessive from the outside, I bought my first home. A 1-bedroom condo, paid in full, held under an LLC with my birth name on it. The name I had before the system handed me a string of last names that never once felt like mine. By 28, I'd traded up. Same building, bigger unit. Hardwood floors. A view of the tree line. And 1 cracked tile by the front door, chipped the very first day I moved in alone, dragging my own suitcase up 3 flights of stairs. I never fixed that tile. Every single time I stepped over it, it reminded me of something important. Nobody co-signed for this. Nobody handed me a key out of pity. I built this floor with my own 2 hands. I met Daniel at a basketball game. Cheap seats, mutual friends, a Tuesday night I almost skipped because of a client deadline. He had the kind of laugh that made strangers 2 rows over smile without knowing why. He asked what I did for a living, and when I told him I was a forensic accountant, he grinned and said, "So you catch people who lie with numbers?" "Mostly," I said. "I catch people who think numbers can't talk." He laughed at that. I liked him immediately. We dated for over a year. He knew about my childhood, not as a tragedy, not as a warning label, just as a fact about me. The same way he knew I drank my coffee black and couldn't parallel park to save my life. When he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. But when we talked finances before the wedding, I told him I had savings. Some property. I never told him how much, or exactly what I owned. He never asked twice. One night early in our marriage, lying in the dark, he asked why I still kept a separate bank account. I told him the truth. Or most of it. I stopped needing anyone to survive the day I turned 18. He laughed like it was a joke. I didn't correct him. I loved Daniel. I want to be clear about that. Because what comes next isn't a story about a man who was cruel to me. It's a story about a man who never once thought to ask the right questions, and a mother who made absolutely sure he never would. Create a hyperrealistic portrait of a man of the uploaded photo, sitting in the driver's seat of a car, wearing a black shirt, combined with a faded light gray jacket and light gray wide-leg pants. White shoes should be visible, complementing the casual look. Round sunglasses with dark lenses should be positioned on the nose, highlighting a confident and slightly ironic facial expression. Relaxed posture, one arm on the sports steering wheel, the other supporting the head, conveying a relaxed look. The interior of the car should include side windows showing urban scenery, trees, buildings, and part of another vehicle, and a black textured seat. Soft natural lighting, simulating daylight coming through the windows, creating a contrast between the warm colors of the clothing and the neutral environment of the car. Vintage style, with desaturated tones and slightly grainy textures, evoking a nostalgic atmosphere. Dominant tones of gray, white, and black, with a balance between external light and internal shadows. Slightly elevated perspective, framing that includes the top of the knees to the head, with the steering wheel partially visible on the right. Vivian started visiting our apartment every week after that. She always had a reason, dropping off leftovers, checking the plumbing, bringing Daniel a jacket he'd forgotten at her house. But each visit was really a small territory check. She moved my coffee maker from one side of the counter to the other. She replaced our bathroom towels with new ones monogrammed with her family's initials. She left handwritten notes on my kitchen table about grout that needed resealing. "I'll call someone." As if she were the landlord and I was simply living there on her good graces. I moved everything back, quietly, every single time. Neither of us ever mentioned it out loud. But we both understood exactly what kind of war it was. One afternoon I overheard her in the kitchen, talking to Daniel while I was supposedly out of earshot. "You need to get her to understand how this family works," she said. "Property is shared. Everyone contributes. It's how we've always done things." That night, Daniel delivered the message to me almost word for word, as if it had just occurred to him on his own. "Mom thinks maybe you should contribute. Like rent, or something, for the apartment." I turned off the television. "We can't pay rent on my own apartment, Daniel." He blinked, genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean I own it. I bought it before I ever met you." Mom said. "Your mom says a lot of things," I told him quietly. "She's never once checked any of them." He let the conversation die the way he always did, by simply not finishing it. The invoice arrived on a Sunday. The whole family summoned for dinner, 8 chairs, a leather folder, an envelope slid across the table with manicured fingers, bracelets scraping lightly against the wood. "This has been overdue," Vivian said, smiling like she'd done me a favor by waiting this long. But I wanted to handle it properly. I opened it. Printed letterhead. A fake property ID number. A line for my signature at the bottom, professionally formatted, Like someone had spent real time making a lie look official. Rent due, $1,500. Tenant, Naomi. I read every single line. Then I folded it neatly, slid it into my purse, and zipped the pocket shut. She had expected tears. A scene. A stammering defense. She got a woman who had been receiving official-looking paperwork from strangers since she was 7 years old. I knew exactly how to read a document, and exactly when one had been built to deceive. She addressed the table like she was chairing a board meeting. Naomi has been living rent-free in a family property for 5 months. That's not how this family operates. Everybody contributes. Everybody earns their place. Daniel's sister leaned back, arms crossed. Must be nice. To marry up. Nobody corrected her. Daniel sat beside me, staring at his glass, the heat radiating off his face but his mouth saying nothing at all. Vivian leaned forward and delivered the line that would echo in my chest for weeks afterward. This is a family matter, she said. You're not family. You're a tenant. Tenant. Not daughter-in-law. Not Naomi. Not even Daniel's wife. A tenant, in a building she had never legally owned a single brick of, expected to pay rent to a woman who had never signed a single deed in her life. I finished my dinner. Every bite. Then I folded my napkin, set it down, and said the only thing I gave her that night. I understand. I'll take care of it. Her eyebrows lifted. She hadn't expected compliance. She had no idea that compliance was never what I meant. 2 days later, I stopped by Vivian's house to collect a dish I'd left behind the week before. She wasn't home. A dentist appointment, Walter told me, waving me inside without a second thought. Dishes are in the kitchen. Help yourself. On my way back through the hallway, I passed her home office. The door was open just a crack, maybe 6 inches. I want to be honest about this part. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. Her desk was covered in paperwork. A filing cabinet stood open. Bank statements fanned across the surface like a hand of cards. What caught my eye wasn't the mess. It was the letterhead. A credit union I didn't recognize. I knew exactly which bank this family used for everything. I'd seen those envelopes on the kitchen counter a dozen times. This was somewhere else entirely. A second account. I couldn't read the numbers from where I stood, but I could see the shape of the page, regular deposits, monthly, stacked down the column like rungs on a ladder. My accountant's brain filed it away without asking my permission. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe a personal savings account. Maybe old. Maybe I was imagining patterns where none existed. But the spreadsheet on my laptop was still open when I got home that night. And my fingers wouldn't stop itching. The next morning at the office, I pulled up the county's public property records. My native language, the one place numbers never lied to me. The family trust held 6 rental properties. Walter was listed as the sole trustee. All public record. What wasn't public, but what I'd already had a private look at, was the trust's internal accounting, because Walter himself had handed me a binder weeks earlier and asked if I, the CPA in the family, could make sense of a tax question for him. I'd helped him. Then I'd handed it back. But numbers stay with me the way song lyrics stay with a musician. I remembered the structure of every page. Sitting now with the public records in front of me, I cross-referenced everything. 4 of the 6 properties had perfectly clean paper trails. Rent collected, logged, deposited into the trust's account exactly the way it should be. 2 properties did not. A small bungalow on the east side. A unit near the Arts District. Both occupied. I drove past on my lunch break and saw a child's bicycle chained to one porch, fresh potted herbs on the other. Real tenants. Real rent being paid every month. But none of that money had touched the trust's books in 8 years. I sat at my desk and did the math the way I'd been trained to do it. Conservative rent estimates for both units, multiplied across 96 months. Roughly $190,000. Money that had gone into someone's pocket and never once appeared on paper Walter had ever signed. My coffee went cold on my desk for the first time in years. I didn't touch it. I just stared at the screen with the particular clarity numbers give you when the story they're telling has turned ugly. Vivian wasn't just controlling. She wasn't just rude. Vivian was stealing, quietly, patiently, for nearly a decade, from her own family. I went home that night, stepped over the cracked tile by my door, and stood in the dark kitchen for a long time without turning on the lights. I made coffee I didn't drink. I held the mug. I tried to understand what this meant for me. The fake invoice was one thing. Petty, humiliating, manageable. I could fight it, or simply let it become a bad story I told at parties I no longer attended with this family. But this was something else entirely. If I was right, and 12 years of professional training told me I was, then Vivian had quietly diverted nearly $200,000 away from her own husband's trust. Money that belonged, in some eventual sense, to Daniel, to his sister, to a niece who was still young enough to believe in fairness. I thought about Walter in his recliner, offering me seconds on dessert, trusting the woman beside him completely because the alternative, truly seeing her, was unbearable. I thought about Daniel. Would he believe me if I told him? Or would he do what he always did, find a way to make it about me overreacting? Me being the difficult one? Me, the outsider who simply couldn't let things go? I put my coffee down. I wasn't going to react. I was going to verify. That's what 12 years of training had taught me. We don't guess. We don't assume. We trace the money until the money tells us the truth, and only then do we decide what to do with it. I told my old boss, Lorraine, about the fake invoice the next day at work. I left out the trust accounts. That felt too large, too unstable, like picking up a live wire before I knew where the current ran. She took off her glasses and looked at me hard. That's not just rude, Naomi. That's fraud. Demanding rent for a property you don't own. That's actionable. She gave me the name of a real estate attorney. I saw him on my lunch break. Leather chairs, framed diplomas, the particular stillness of a room built for delivering bad news professionally. He asked 3 questions. Did I have the invoice? Yes. Was my ownership documented? Yes. Had Vivian ever been formally authorized to manage my apartment? Absolutely not. You've got potential claims here, he said. Want to proceed? I hesitated, not because I doubted the case, but because I was already thinking about something far bigger. Not yet, I told him. Let me sit with it. Before I left, I asked one more question. Not about the invoice this time. If someone managed a family trust property and collected the rent without ever reporting it to the trustee, what would that be called? He paused. Breach of fiduciary duty. Possibly embezzlement, depending on intent. And almost certainly an unreported income problem with the IRS. I thanked him. I walked back to my office with that fake invoice still folded in my purse, and a question forming in my mind that simply would not leave me alone. That night, Daniel found me at the kitchen table with the county records still open on my screen. "What are you doing?" he asked, leaning over my shoulder. I didn't close the tab. He saw the address. The county seal. The letters LLC sitting right beside our home. Naomi, just pay the rent. It's $1,500. We can afford it. I closed the laptop slowly. We can't pay rent on my own apartment, Daniel. His arms crossed, the exact same gesture his mother made, and the resemblance stung us both, even if only I noticed it. What do you mean, your apartment? I looked at him straight on. I bought this place 5 years ago. With my own savings. It's held under my LLC, my birth name. Your mother is charging me rent for a home I already own. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming behind us. He looked at the counter. At the window. At the cracked tile by the front door he'd walked over 100 times without ever once asking what it was from. What LLC? He finally said. Calder. I registered it years before I met you. Why didn't you tell me? You never asked. He stood there in my kitchen, in my apartment, in a building I had owned since before I knew his name, and I watched him try to absorb the idea that the woman he'd married had an entire floor beneath her he'd never once thought to look for. He didn't sit with it. Instead, he reached for his phone. We need to tell my mom. She needs to know she was wrong. And then what? I said. She apologizes. Takes back the invoice. What actually changes, Daniel? He held up a finger and dialed anyway. Put it on speaker. Vivian picked up on the second ring, voice already sharp, like she'd been waiting. Daniel explained everything, the LLC, the purchase date, the deed. 4 seconds of silence. That is ridiculous, Daniel, she said flatly. She's lying to you. No foster kid owns property through an LLC. She is manipulating you. I heard it. He heard it. And I saw something in his eyes far worse than disagreement. I saw the pull, the gravitational field that had held him in his mother's orbit for 35 straight years. No deed, no county record, no public filing was ever going to outweigh the voice on the other end of that call. She needs to understand her place in this family, Vivian continued. I want both of you at dinner Sunday. We'll sort this out properly. He hung up, looked at me like a man standing between 2 buildings, trying to guess which one would fall first. She wants us at dinner. Fine, I said. Clean. Final. Like a signature at the bottom of a document that couldn't be taken back. I spent the next 3 nights at the office until 7, then home with my laptop until midnight. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns hot and fast and then it's gone. I was something colder, steadier, doing the one thing 12 years of training had built me to do. Following the money. I called Walter and asked, as a professional courtesy, if I could look over the trust binder one more time. He dropped it off without a single question. That was Walter, trusting to the point of complete vulnerability. I went through every page. Public deed records confirmed all 6 properties. The trust's own registration confirmed Walter as sole trustee. But Vivian's name appeared nowhere in any of it. Not as co-trustee. Not as manager. Not as anything official at all. And yet she controlled everything. Tenants, repairs, lease renewals, deposits. Walter had simply handed her the keys, decades ago, and never once asked for a report. 4 properties, clean. 2 properties, completely silent, for 8 straight years. I cross-referenced rent comparables for both neighborhoods. Conservative estimate, about $2,000 a month, combined, for 96 months. $192,000. Missing. And I had a very good idea exactly where it had gone, because I'd already seen that letterhead through a 6-inch gap in a door, and the rhythm of those deposits matched the rhythm of rent that should have gone somewhere else entirely. Thursday night, Daniel used my laptop while his phone charged. I was in the shower. When I came out, he was sitting at the kitchen table, jaw tight, browser history open in front of him. Tenant rights. Landlord fraud. Civil lawsuit. Real estate attorney. You're planning to sue my mother, he said. Not a question. I didn't deny it. Your mother issued a fraudulent document demanding payment for a home she doesn't own, I said. In my profession, that has a name. It's a piece of paper, Naomi. It's fraud. He stood, walked to the counter, pressed both palms flat against it. The exact same gesture his mother made at her dinner table when she wanted a room to fall silent. You're tearing this family apart over a piece of paper. I took a breath. Held it. Let it go. Your mother tore this apart the night she called me a tenant in my own home. He didn't have an answer for that. He slept on the couch that night. I sat in the bedroom with the door closed, looking not at the attorney's business card on my nightstand, but at my spreadsheet, the columns filling in, the numbers shaping into a story that had stopped being about a fake invoice and started being about where money disappears to when nobody's watching. The lawsuit was never actually my plan. The lawsuit was Vivian's assumption about what someone like me would do. React, fight her on her own field, in front of her own lawyer. I was done fighting on anyone's field but mine. By Friday, she knew about the attorney. Daniel had told her. Of course he had. And true to form, Vivian didn't panic. She moved. A letter arrived from her family's longtime lawyer, a man who'd known Walter for 20 years and attended Daniel's high school graduation. Polite. Professional. Corporate code for don't embarrass us in public. Any legal matters were to be directed through his office, where they could drag for months, maybe years, through motions and counterclaims. She'd built a fortress. Around the wrong building. The fake invoice was never going to be my weapon. That was never the hill I planned to die on. The hill I'd chosen was the one she didn't even know existed. The missing rent, The second bank account. A question she could not possibly answer without incriminating herself in front of the one person whose trust she needed most. She thought I was coming through the front door. She never once checked the side entrance. Late that Friday night, while Daniel slept on the couch again, I pulled up Walter's ledger on my laptop one final time. Tracing the exact month everything had gone quiet. October, 8 years earlier. Both properties stopped reporting within 3 months of each other. I scrolled back through what I knew of this family's history, and there it was. That same October, Walter had been hospitalized. A severe health scare that nearly took him. 11 days in the hospital. Daniel had mentioned it once, early in our relationship, almost in passing. Dad had a scare a few years back. He's fine now. Vivian had started diverting the rent the exact same month her husband nearly died. I sat with that for a long time. She wasn't funding jewelry. She wasn't living some secret double life. She was hoarding. Building a cushion. A woman who'd clawed her way out of nothing, who had married for stability, watching that stability nearly shatter in a hospital room, and doing the only thing she knew how to do. Grabbing what she could hold, and hiding it somewhere nobody could take it back. I understood that impulse. I carried a version of it in my own bones. The difference was simple. I had built my safety net with money I earned myself. She had built hers out of money that was never hers to take. Criuma imagem realista basada na foto que estu enviando, substituendo a rosto y apariencia do homem pela minha imagem. Cena, homem elegant relaxando embarco deluxo navegando por lago como cercado por montañas y casas sofisticadas ao fundo. O sol de tarde lumina a cena com luz doada, refletindo na agua cristalina. De tal his du persona gem. Use minha foto como base para o rosto, cabello y apariencia geral. O homem está usando terno beige claro, sem gravata, como camisa parcialmente aberta, exhibindo visual sofisticado y confiante. El usa óculos de sol escuros y relojio deluxo no pulso. Ambient. Barco de madera polida como estofamento claro, navegando aguas azuis como reflexo do sui de paisagem. O fundo mostra vilas a beira do lago e vegetacao exuberantem cenário europeu elegante. Estilo visual, fotografia de alta qualidade, estilo editorial de revista de moda, iluminacao natural e tons quentes. I stood. Smoothed my blouse. Looked at Walter, because he was the one person at that table who deserved to hear the rest. The property records are public, Walter. You can verify everything yourself by Monday morning. I'd recommend an independent CPA audit the trust. Not me. I'm too close to this. Then I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I walked past the family photograph hanging crooked on the wall, past the credenza she touched every time she entered a room, and out into the evening air, which smelled like cut grass and somebody else's certainty finally coming apart. The bracelet, for the first time all night, made no sound at all. Daniel didn't follow me out. I drove home alone, the engine humming, my own breathing steady and slow. The way you breathe after holding still for far too long, your body finally remembering it's allowed to move again. At home, I stepped over the cracked tile and stood for a moment in the entryway of the life I had built with 9 years of work and a discipline most people mistook for coldness. Then I made coffee. Past 8 at night. And I didn't care. I needed the ritual. The smell of it filling a kitchen that was entirely, undeniably mine. My phone buzzed against the counter. A text from Lorraine. How did it go? I typed back. I asked the question. Her reply came in 5 seconds. Proud of you. A text from Daniel's sister. I didn't know. I read it. I didn't respond. A text from Daniel. I'm sorry. I read that one too. I didn't respond to that either. A text from Walter. Short. Unhurried. Exactly like the man himself. Thank you. I saved that one. I sat with my coffee and drank every last warm swallow of it, in a kitchen where every single surface was exactly where I had chosen to put it. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just sat in the particular quiet that follows the hardest true thing you've ever said out loud, the strange, open space that truth leaves behind once it's finally let out of the room. A week later, Walter hired an independent CPA. Not me. I recused myself immediately, to formally audit the trust. The findings came back 3 weeks after that. $187,400. Slightly under my estimate. Close enough that the difference didn't matter to anyone in that room. Nearly $200,000, diverted over 8 years into a personal account that existed under Vivian's name alone. Walter never pressed criminal charges. He told Daniel it was a family matter, the same phrase Vivian had once used to silence me at her own table. But he acted. He removed her as property manager from every single unit, hired a licensed management company, restructured the trust to require independent audits every single year, replaced the family's longtime attorney with someone new, someone who had never once played golf with his wife's secrets. Vivian never went to jail. She went somewhere quieter than that. She lost the keys. She lost the leather folder. She lost the seat at the head of the table where she had directed this family's business for 2 decades. The bracelet still sits on her wrist. It just doesn't clink the same way against surfaces that no longer belong to her. Daniel's sister called me 3 weeks after that dinner. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I called you a foster kid playing house." "I was a foster kid," I told her. "I was playing for keeps. We're not friends." But the hostility between us ended that day. What was left was simply neutral, a wire quietly disconnected from whatever had been powering it. Daniel moved out 2 weeks after the dinner. We separated, not with screaming, not with thrown dishes, with the tired, heavy recognition that he'd spent 35 years choosing the wrong person to be loyal to. And I had spent 5 months waiting for him to choose differently. I don't hate Vivian. I understand her. And somehow that's harder than hating her would have been. She grew up with very little, in a town that taught her early that stability was the only thing worth chasing. She married a steady, kind man with a house and a front door that locked, and spent 40 years building a portfolio so she'd never have to depend on luck again. And when her husband nearly died, she panicked. She started taking, not for greed, not for luxury, but for the exact same reason I built an LLC under my birth name and never told a soul. Because she was terrified of going back to having nothing. I know that fear intimately. I carry it in my own chest, in a cracked tile by my front door, in a spreadsheet I opened before I even understood what fight I was preparing for. The difference between us was simple, in the end. I built my floor with my own 2 hands. She built hers on top of someone else's. And when the weight of it all finally came down, it landed on the people who had trusted her the most. The safest home you will ever own is the one nobody else can lay claim to. Not because you're selfish, but because you are worth protecting. By someone, even if that someone has to be you. A fake invoice on a dinner plate. A gold bracelet that finally stopped clinking. One quiet question about rent that nobody in that room could answer. If you've ever protected something you built with your own 2 hands, or if you're still learning how, share this story with someone who needs to hear it tonight. By the way, where are you watching this story from? Let us know in the comments. It's amazing to see how far these stories travel around the world. This has been Calm Drama Stories. We'll see you in the next one.